My guest today is Murray Collins, CEO of Space Intelligence. I managed to catch up with Murray during his recent visit to Singapore. Space Intelligence provides data and mapping information to customers who share a common goal: to achieve zero deforestation and mass restoration to tackle the climate emergency. As Murray says during our interview, to give the world any chance of hitting climate targets, there has to be large-scale emission reductions and large-scale protection of the existing carbon sinks. It is not an either-or. This was an enlightening conversation I hope that you enjoyed as much as I did. Welcome to the Carbon Exposure Project. Murray, welcome to Singapore and welcome to the Carbon Exposure Project. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to be on board. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, that's great. Hey, so you're working in a really interesting space, and I mean that, and excuse the pun here, in terms of space intelligence, your company.
Yeah.
But you're providing a really interesting solution set and data set to the market.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could provide us a little bit of context and background about yourself, but also your organization, Space Intelligence.
Perfect. Thanks again for having me. Great to be in Singapore. I've actually been visiting Asia for the past 20 years.
Really great.
If you'd met me probably 15 years ago, I would have been more frequently dressed in some jungle boots, a rucksack on my back, wandering around the forest, measuring trees.
Great.
Roll forward to 2024, I'm running a business with my co-founder of over 50 people, all focused on the production of the highest quality nature mapping data. So what we do is provide information on forest biomass, land cover change, mainly in the domain of the voluntary car market. And the use cases for that, we're helping people who are producers, so the developers of projects, to use the best quality data to bring their project to market. And then we're supporting people on the buy side to do things like due diligence prior to investment into a project developer or engaging in an offtake agreement. And so it's a really interesting time because there's such interest and such passion, particularly here in Singapore, for the development of these really, really high quality projects which generate high quality credits, which I know is a world that you're very passionately interested in.
Very much so. No, that's great. And that's fantastic context in terms of the different, let's say, use cases and the interest in terms of users of your data. You mentioned, obviously, the interest in the market for high quality carbon credits and obviously the satellite information that you're effectively digesting provides insights on that. Yeah, can you provide a little bit more kind of detail on that component, and also the kind of impact that it has also for digital MRV, which is another really important, I think, component of the market in terms of building integrity and trust.
Okay, yeah, sure. So all driven by the analysis of satellite data. There's a large number of satellites which are flying around the Earth at the moment, but let's say that we're drowning in data for want of information. So the real trick and our value in this market is being able to take that data, fuse it, and then analyze it in an ecologically meaningful way, and then transform it into insights for people who are either, as I say, trying to audit a project, so a new project coming onto the market, or trying to take a look at the proposition if you're on the buy side. So you've got tons of different data sets, and they're quite difficult to deal with. In particular, if you're trying to understand what a synthetic aperture radar image means, you have to really understand quite a lot about radar physics. What the backscatter signals mean with respect to what you're actually trying to understand on the ground, which in our use case typically is the amount of forest cover and the amount of carbon contained within. So if you'd like, we can go into a little bit more detail on the satellite.
Let's go down that rabbit hole. Yeah.
So that you broadly got two families of satellite data. You've got active remote sensing and passive remote sensing. Starting off with passive remote sensing, it's typically using visible or near visible light. So from the sun, reflecting off the surface of the Earth, to all intents and purposes, you've got a camera bolted onto a satellite. I mean, obviously that's very, very crude. These instruments are calibrated with hundreds of millions of dollars, but they're flying around the Earth. And so when it's daytime, you're using the reflected sunlight from the surface of the Earth to make images, and the reflected sunlight gives you information about the target. So in our case, the vegetation, its health, and you can relate those signals to things like canopy cover, for instance. Then in the domain of active remote sensing, you've got a transmitter as well as a sensor on the satellite. So synthetic aperture radar, think about it as pings. Like in the same way like a bat is echolocating, you're pinging pulses of microwave energy at the surface of the Earth, then listening to the backscatter. And that signal which comes back from the surface of the Earth, it interacts in particular ways with the target. So that backscatter signal that we call it, you'll get a different response if that backscatter is interacting with a very big tropical tree than you would do if you interact with a flat surface like a water body. So you'll end up with a lot of the energy being scattered away and not much scattered back at the sensor. With a water body, a big building or a big tree, you'll get a lot more backscattered energy. And that's like the core intuition about how you can use that information to tell you something about the quality of a forest with regards to its biomass stock and hence carbon. The third type of data we should talk about is LiDAR. So it's this is pulses of laser light. There's a spaceborne laser unit called the JEDI instrument, which is flying around. Well, it's just been bolted back onto the International Space Station. And what that does, it fires directly down at the surface of the Earth, pulses of laser light. Now, if you imagine that you've got a 30-meter tall forest, 40, 50 meters, some of the laser light bounces off the canopy straight away. Some of it bounces off the forest floor. And so you can take the speed of light, and so you know how long those pulses are taking to return back up to the laser unit, and that means that you can derive the height of the forest. And so the height of the forest is directly related to its biomass, because like taller trees, on average, I think most people would be comfortable with this, that have bigger trunks. If you've got bigger trunks, contains a larger volume, and that contains more biomass, and then it gives you more carbon as a result. So if you integrate these three different data sets, you're able to tell the expanse of the forest and also an estimate of the amount of biomass in that forest. And then you take those measures over time, you can track the changes. So you could track deforestation, but you can also make estimates of the amount of carbon which has been emitted over a period. And of course, this is
also being sequestered in this case.
And then also being sequestered. But critically here, forests get cut down a lot more quickly than they grow. And so it's a slightly different challenge. But yeah, critically, that's what you're trying to avoid deforestation in certain types of forest projects. In others, you're doing reforestation, restoration, and you're more focused on removals. I think we could probably dig into that point a bit later on. But yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why that data is so critical, whatever your position in the markets, to really understand what's going on. So if you're an auditor looking at a project which has been brought to market, you want the best quality data to really understand what the potential is for that project to issue credits. More broadly across the market, high quality data, we believe, is what's going to underpin integrity and transparency.
That's fantastic, and thank you for that lesson on satellite lasers, space lasers, etc., and the granularity with regards to discerning essentially the biomass content of these forests, and also correctly highlighting, and for our audience, and very importantly, the impact with regards to deforestation. Right, as you said, there's quite an accelerated pace with regards to deforestation.
I should say cheers. Thanks. Thanks for
this. Let's do that.
We should we should point out as well. These are mocktails, right?
Oh no! Now you've pierced the fourth wall here. But movie magic, sure. No, people can pretend it's a cocktail. But yeah, no. So that's great. So in terms of the market demand for your data, obviously you've outlined that and the potential here for having that better digital MRV component.
So you did ask about the digital MRV piece. So if you're a developer, you're going to need to prove the ongoing status of your project. It supports the monitoring, reporting, and verification for anyone who's not used to these
PLAs, three-letter acronyms.
This is an acronym-rich environment, right?
Very much so.
So you need a glossary before you dive into this space. So the monitoring, reporting, and verification of a project. What really we're seeing now is that obviously the standards will have some basis, some direction for how we should be monitoring projects. In practice, we're seeing now that people are particularly on the demand side, they're saying, well, okay, yes, we'll have an update on the carbon stock assessment in a few years' time, but really we want to have assessment of what's going on in this project on an annual basis. And ideally, on a quarterly basis, we want to know what's going on because there's a risk. We've got assets under management, which therefore have a risk. There's a risk component. And suddenly we're finding a whole series of new people and a whole series of new conversations where we're actually dealing with risk and compliance committees or officers who want to know actually how is that asset actually performing on the ground on a quite a frequent basis. And people come from a background where data is typically available on a very, very high frequency basis. And so, we're improving the frequency with which we monitor projects to serve that demand.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. In other more established financial markets and other asset classes, that free-flowing data enables decision-making at the risk level to be done in a really sort of expeditious manner, right? And time frame. And it helps to unlock significant quotients of capital to move rapidly. And I think that you correctly highlighted that this is one of the roadblocks in the carbon markets. That effectively that lack of data creates essentially just uncertainty, and then the status quo there is effectively inaction, right? And then folks that are looking to allocate capital essentially say, well, we're not ready to do so at this point in time. Exactly. And then the risk, the risk sort of on capital, right? The trading folks, are beholden to that as well. So I think that's sort of a chilling effect, and hopefully, a second order impact in terms of the data that you're generating helps to unlock that.
And that's really our position in the market. Obviously, you can't do everything.
No, of course.
There are people who are willing to spend money in this space. Obviously, there are lots of project developers who are now bringing stuff on stream. So there's still really...
But there needs to be buy-side appetite for that.
There needs to be appetite, but I think exactly. That's the problem. There's people who are sort of willing to do it, but there are still these concerns about actually the quality, the transparency, the integrity, and that's our play really. That we'll provide you these data with a slight layer of solution so that you can go ahead and present the potential investment in a project in a nice intuitive way which makes sense to you, so you can understand the carbon stocks, the historical changes in an area, you understand its value, the co-benefits associated with a project, and that will be our contribution, and that is our contribution to the market. We don't develop projects ourselves, so people ask us that, well, why don't you go and develop projects? So, well, we're an independent third-party provider of data. That would undermine our independence in the market if we did that.
It represents a conflict of interest in that case as well.
It's a conflict of interest, exactly. And we don't rate projects either. We don't go to that stage of saying, okay, that this is effectively an A-grade project or whatever your ranking is.
I think can I just focus on that point, because effectively, that's a really clear delineation. Essentially, what you said is that what your team is providing is essentially a data layer, effectively, of that underlying complex data set. Very rich data set. But then the difference between your organization, as I understand it, and then let's say rating agencies who not only analyze and digest that data, but then actually provide an opinion with regards to the quality, and then rate it with an A or
so if you think about
score, you're not providing that.
So they've got that layer there where they're giving an opinion into the market and giving that rating. What we're seeing, there's probably some confirmation bias in terms of like the people who come to us, and some selection bias, that people don't want a rating. They really want to dig into the numbers underneath. So they want to go to the next level. If you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a nature-based solutions program, whether that's for your own net zero commitments or because you've got a trading desk, you're investing a lot of money, you really want to see the detail. underneath. So you want to go into depth about the uncertainty into the estimation of carbon, for instance, because that is in itself an interesting number for people who are interested in risk. Because if you say, well, we're going to be having, we've got like X million of tons of potential in a project, that's a point estimate, but actually any modeled estimate has uncertainty around that. So we'll give you a confidence interval for the estimation of those stocks, and for the historical change as well. We can go into a great amount of detail, which sets you up really very, very well for understanding the broad context. So the way in which a landscape has evolved historically, so the baseline conditions, and you get all of that information, and with the associated uncertainty. It's like, so it's really going into depth rather than just taking
a high level view. Yeah, and look, and not to denounce, like effectively the rating agencies are still doing that, but they're providing an opinion, which I think targets complementary, but I think separate, let's say, use case, but also client base. Effectively, I'm thinking corporates and SMEs that don't spend hundreds of millions, maybe it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're satisfied with the rating and opinion, and they effectively lead them to the experts. The folks that are the large energy companies, I suspect, that would be clients of yours, who are wanting to go down in a deeper, let's say, granularity with regards to that data to derive their own insights, and oftentimes before there's potential for even a rating to be had, right? So they're looking for an asymmetry with regards to where they want to invest, but also where they're looking to do the offtake. So there's opportunities for all, but I think that the common theme here is essentially more data begets more insight, and then that insight begets more confidence, and that begets more liquidity.
It's like anything, right? If you're going to make a big investment, the more information, the better. If you're seeking a position in the market, or indeed you just want a valuable asset, then you're going to allocate some resources to make sure that you're getting what you think you're getting, but you're going to make a selection based on the best possible information, and that's why people come to us. So in terms of the use cases, we'll work with some very sophisticated teams. They want to license our data to incorporate in their own analyses, and so subscribe to our data to get annual updates for a particular country, for instance. And they'll go away and use that, and we might not necessarily, we know what they're doing with it generally. This is in the context of development of nature-based solutions projects, but they want to analyze it in their own way. We are a data-first company, so you can consume it through the new platform coming out in Q3, but also you can license it for the development of your project. So you can have a download which incorporates into your project documentation, and that, the more of that high quality information is out there, the bigger the impact.
Murray, thanks for that really detailed intro and great conversation around really the important work that you're doing. Do you mind if I bring it back just a little bit? You mentioned something earlier around, you spent quite a lot of time here in Asia, and in the ASEAN region in particular. Can you give us some background really of the type of work that brought you to this region? Because I think that's really, important for context setting, and also just the journey around how you set up Space Intelligence, if you wouldn't mind indulging me.
Of course. I've always been obsessed by forests, tropical forests in particular. And so I've spent the entirety really of my adult life and my career focused on forests. I started out lots more boots on the ground. So in Indonesia, did quite a lot of work in Sumatra doing survey work out in the last remaining mountainous rainforest there. I did my master's degree work up in northern Sulawesi, on one of the early stage RED projects. So looking at how carbon could be used to conserve a forest, which was home, or hopefully still is home, to the babi rusa, the curly-toothed pig. And then I came to living between Bogor, Jakarta and Jambi for my PhD work, where I was looking at how carbon could be used to conserve one of the last remaining peat swamp forests in Asia, which still houses tigers, Sumatra tigers, which are critically endangered, of course. So that was really my motivation to explore this space, is that there is a possibility to drive more capital into conservation of these critically endangered ecosystems. And the carbon market was evolving at that point. So this is 2007 2008 when I started to get involved, and of course that was a tough time for the market. We're now through to a point where I think it's much more of a viable proposition. This is going to happen, and is happening. And so this is really the basis of the development of our business. In 2009, flipping from Southeast Asia, I was working in the forests of West Africa. I spent 7 months working for the government of Gabon.
Okay.
The entirety of the time out in the rainforest measuring trees. So I measured some 4,000 trees in 7 months.
It's like physical sampling and measuring.
Actually out in the forest. So, I mean, I was slimmer and fitter then, right? I was carrying a bag through the rainforest with hammers and nails and tree tags.
Yep.
Literally climbing up, measuring the diameter to estimate the biomass. I met my co-founder, Ed Mitchard, during that period. Great. Really brilliant mind. And we both worked in that academic context up until relatively recently. We had that realization that, look, the next paper and the next research project isn't really going to help this market to scale up. And we created Space Intelligence as a means to bring these really high quality data sets and insights into a market and to help it evolve. So this is where it's come from. Like tons of in-depth experience on the ground, being out in forests, working with projects, working with national governments to advise them how to set up forest monitoring programs. And when we just we've gone from there up to a company which is now 51 people, composed of data scientists, PhDs. We've got 12, 13 PhDs in our team. Wow. In Earth observation, analytics, data science, machine learning, a dedicated engineering team who are building up the internal tools that we use to analyze data, but also this new web data platform. And so, yeah, it's been in particular the past couple of years, we've been moving very, very fast to professionalize the business and engage more with the market. So it's gone from really boots on the ground, literally tree hugging, right?
Yep. Literally tree hugging.
Literally tree hugging.
Yep.
The job spec that I got for Gabon was you're going to be able to need to be able to work long hours in a remote location carrying a massive load whilst dodging gorillas and elephants. And I did literally have to dodge charging elephants on the job in the forest, through to running now this tech company. So yeah, it's been a really, really exciting ride.
Yeah, it's a different perspective, literally, from on the ground to now viewing that same biomass, but estimating it from satellite.
It from space. And so Ed really he's a chief scientist, the co-founder in the business. I did some of my PhD work with him, and that's why I moved to Edinburgh in the first case. Ed's driven a lot of the scientific work. If you go into the literature about how you do this in practice, so how do you relate satellite signals to the properties of forests on the ground? That's what I did my own PhD on. It's like the combination of the on the ground work with the satellite signals, and that's one of the reasons why people trust our business, is because it's not just that there's an opportunity like AI and big data and you jump on it, get the VC backing. We've been doing this for years, and we've got over 100 scientific papers on how you do that.
Yeah, right.
And now it's built into technology, so it's a scalable proposition now. Which is super exciting, and that's why I'm here in Singapore.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. It's evolving as a hub,
definitely
for carbon. That's what brought me here, particularly at this moment. There was a conference, Net Zero with Nature-Based Solutions conference. Really great to meet people who are investing into project developers, interested in the offtake, also the developers themselves. And a whole bunch of new relationships in 2 days here. But then there's just an enormous amount going on. There's 2 exchanges. You've got CIX and Air Carbon based here. Big pools of capital, of course, which is great if you're trying to scale up a tech business. Some project developers, our clients, are actually based here, and I met them, some of them yesterday.
Great.
So there's an immense amount going on.
Don't forget the trading community. It's a really vibrant secondary and primary market in terms of the trading community here as well, which leverages essentially Singapore's geography as a trade and transport hub. Yeah. And I think what you mentioned earlier is absolutely correct. It's certainly part of the broader Singapore Inc. ambition set to establish Singapore as a carbon hub. But I think that ambition has been realized. It is literally one of the most vibrant carbon centers.
I can feel the energy here.
Very much so. And the talent pool is increasing. And it is breathtaking to see such a growth and synergy between service providers across the entire spectrum. Obviously, what you're adding to the mix is great. So, really keen to obviously welcome you to the fold if you do end up expanding here in the region.
Well, I'm very, very curious about the opportunity. Actually, it seems to be like a natural home for the business. You've got the producers nearby.
Very much so.
Malaysia, very, very interesting. A lot of interest suddenly seems to be coming out of Malaysia, Peninsular Malaysia. We already support projects in Sumatra, Kalimantan as well. So the producers are nearby, the demand side, the infrastructure, the trading community, all here in Singapore. So there's a feeling of energy. There's a lot going on here, and it's a natural potential home for the business.
For the business. Well, that's terrific. And that's great to see. Great to hear. Thanks for that background. It obviously gives really great context in terms of your journey and obviously that evolution, right? Through like you said, boots on the ground to now analyzing that space data. Given that context, and obviously given now the changing kind of paradigm, right? You operate in this technology company, and now you're looking to sort of expand. Where do you see the business going in the next 5 to 10 years? Like we're in 2024 now. Where do you see it going in 2030, for example?
By 2030, I think actually if you're okay, we'll zoom out a little bit more because let's consider the context of why we're doing any of this at all. So we're trying to race to net zero, right? In 2023, I think we put out 40 billion tons, over 40 billion tons of carbon. And the macro view is that fully 30% of all of the emissions reductions that we need to hit net zero have to come from nature, right? So we've got to be investing in forests, sustainable agriculture in order to hit our net zero targets. This has to happen. So we need to be driving huge amounts of capital into forest conservation and restoration. The other key things are that tropical forests are the most biodiverse ecosystem terrestrially on the planet. And they also support between 1.3 and 1.6 billion of the world's poorest people. So if you invest in forests, you're going to be accelerating our progress towards net zero targets, but you're also going to be addressing the dual crisis of the loss of biodiversity and supporting some of the world's poorest people. So this is a no-brainer. We have to do it. And so I see space intelligence as playing a critical part in that process. What you do is a critical part of it as well, because it's providing that infrastructure, the liquidity for those projects to be able to develop, for the actual work on the ground to happen. So great place for us to be in Southeast Asia, here in Singapore, to have this conversation, to base our business and to support this very, very high level target. We have to do this.
Thank you for that. That is fantastic. And that context set with regards to the importance of nature, it's mind-blowing that it's such a large quotient, 30+% of the emission reductions coming from nature. It really brings home the importance of nature-based solutions. And you alluded to it earlier in terms of criticisms at the carbon market, certainly on the verified carbon market. We'll put the voluntary aside for a second.
We'll bin that. We'll go for... Well, I think it should just be there. Let's actually just bin the voluntary carbon market.
It's just a carbon crediting market. Now there's interoperable with compliance systems under Article 6, et cetera. But you're absolutely right. But nature-based solutions play such a critical role. And they have been overall undermined by criticisms in the media. Some justified with regards to criticisms around overcrediting. But that overcrediting risk, I think, has been overblown. And essentially what the criticisms have led to is a lack of capital flows into protecting these important biomes, and essentially a paralysis on the corporate side because of the risk aversion. What your data set provides is essentially a solution to allay that, because now there's granularity with regards to the data to demonstrate to the standards on the one side, as you alluded to earlier, for stronger digital MRVs, so that there is certification that is closer to the actual the crediting is more accurate, and then also on the buy side they can overcome these perceptions of that risk. But then what we can see is hopefully that financial flow to start really,
but that's
not
what
to
we need.
Trickle, but to really rapidly.
That's what's deeply frustrating about this is that there's been this very, very strange anti-nature rhetoric which has been pervading the press in the past 18 months.
And it's coming from folks that are really passionate about protecting nature.
On the one hand, passionate about protecting nature, and this is a fantastic opportunity in a nascent market to drive huge amounts of capital into conserving and restoring the natural world. We've got to take that opportunity and really make it work. In the evolution of any market, there are problems, and there are definitely projects which haven't been successful. And of course,
and they should be called out.
They should be called out. But does that mean then you should abandon one of the best opportunities we have to hit our net zero targets, address biodiversity loss, and support some of the world's poorest people?
And sustainable development as a result.
It's sustainable development. The answer has to be no. So what do? You take the lessons of the past.
Yes.
You build in new technology. You take the data sets which we can now provide and provide full transparency in terms of like the historical conditions in an area, the development over time of the area, the impact that a project has made. We can do all of this now. So just because some things haven't worked in the past doesn't mean that you should ditch one of the best opportunities that we have to tackle climate change. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And I love the fact that you're so emphatic with that no, right? And that you're actually putting your money where your mouth is effectively, and you're operating, a business that's essentially providing that solution set to help to provide that confidence and ultimately get more and more investment and capital flows into what is such an important component for not only, as you said, the sustainable development, but the biodiversity, which are often forgotten, and then obviously the protection of these natural sinks from a carbon perspective.
I mean, you mentioned like the corporates are quite risk averse. An interesting dynamic which came out of New York Climate Week was there was a new couple of terms emerged of, you've got greenwashing, which everybody's quite comfortable with. On the other hand, there's green wishing, right, where you wish that it wasn't a problem and it will go away.
And then there's green hushing.
Green hushing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of folks out there in major corporates that are allocating capital, are going to invest in nature-based solutions, and it's a part of their strategy. But because of everything that's been going on over the past 18 months, they're not really shouting very much about it. So
and I'll add another component, which is the one that's the most concerning to me, which is essentially the folks that have been staunch supporters of the market and market-based solutions, and effectively they've been chased out of the market, where effectively they've been vilified for taking voluntary action.
Well, these are the people who are actually doing something.
Well, and channeling
so it should be
hundreds
the other way
of
around.
Millions of dollars towards nature-based solutions and other really high
which
impact
is what we need
solutions.
To tackle climate change.
Exactly, but because of a few essentially press articles, the risk team effectively says, hey, listen, tools down. And then we see that chilling effect in the market. I'm not going to name names, but it's well known in terms of clients that I've represented. And some of them have made big splashes and commitments with regards to carbon neutrality. And then only a few years later, essentially pause or permanently stop those commitments. And that I think is the perverse outcome, and that we need to stamp out. And I think that what you just mentioned around essentially that emphatic no, we should not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Essentially, we should channel finance to these activities.
Channel finance
really
into
important.
high quality projects which make a real impact. That's surely what we're aiming for. And then by definition, the bad projects, the ones that aren't making an impact, they're poorly run, whatever the problem is, they will drop out. And
the natural attrition.
That is the way that markets operate. So. That's just what we need. What I find immensely frustrating as well is exactly what you just said, but I feel like I want to reiterate the point.
Please, is that
why not target the laggards who aren't doing anything? Why target the people who are actually driving capital
who are leaders, not
into forest conservation? Whereas what the macro target is to drive capital into these natural ecosystems so that we reduce emissions, you support sequestration and the biodiversity and the local economic development. That's what we need to drive more of and support more high quality.
Completely agree, and I'd love to have that as the exclamation point, but can I add you? Can I raise you? The answer to your question is why, is because in media, in traditional media, there's this perverse incentive that if it bleeds, it leads. And so traditional media that don't necessarily understand the nuance or have a vested agenda, right, with a bias, essentially are trying to do that, naming and shaming, and they have this effect of chilling the market. And I think that that's run its natural course. There's essentially they're beating a dead horse, again, to mix a bunch of metaphors here. But that story now doesn't seem to get the clicks that it's getting because of what you're saying, that there's something much more significant around channeling finance to deliver on impact. And I think that we're seeing that the market effectively turn around. And to your point, this more sort of focus on integrity and building back better the carbon market, version 2.0, is really important to demonstrate higher integrity and a pathway forward. And obviously there will be attrition, projects that weren't run effectively or had essentially inefficient baselines, et cetera, are being stamped out. We've got a new consolidated methodologies under Vera, for example, and not a lot of the other standards are focusing on essentially utilizing reference levels. And now we're getting into sort of really specific kind of nerd speak around carbon, but reference levels at a jurisdictional level, we're seeing this evolution around.
And then you can allocate it, so you're going to have a baseline set at the national level, then there's going to be a risk assessment so that a project is going to be allocated a set of credits which it can issue, so it's not deciding it itself. And again, I mean, that's going to reduce some costs for project developers, but it's also, I think it's going to give a lot more confidence in the market that you've got a set amount of credits which can be allocated in a given place, and therefore, given the risk weighting to a given project, that's going to support higher quality, I think, going forward. So there are things which are happening, and wouldn't it be great if somebody in the media would pick up and say, oh, there's lots of positive changes which are happening in a key component of our fight against climate change. That would be great. Maybe you're telling that story. So
No, you're telling that story, and that's a challenge. I'm going to look right down the pipe, but that's a challenge to the media. There are really good stories and really good people and great people actually doing this work to channel that finance to communities and to protect nature-based systems and solutions.
Well, critically, we just need more of it.
We need more of it. So achieving scale is a call to action.
There's a massive financing gap. I mean, go to read any UN report about like what we need to conserve biodiversity, support the world's poorest people, to halt deforestation and reverse it through reforestation. There's still a massive gap in financing required. So what's frustrating about the anti-nature brigade is that there's no solution proposed. So what is the alternative? My response to it is actually we need to take lessons of the past, learn from them, create the infrastructure, which you're a key component of, and we scale it up much faster. We focus on high quality, we use the technology, and we get more and more capital into the market. We get more competition for high quality projects. And that just means then you're going to get a multiplier effect with more money, more competitive action going on in the space, and we move faster towards our net zero goals. That's what we've got to do.
Murray, thank you very much for the time. I couldn't have said it better myself. So I think we end there. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it, mate.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Cheers.